Welcome everybody. Well done for coming out in the windy weather, the cold weather. It's interesting. Well, it's warm in here, but it's interesting because when I walked this walk, there was one day when I walked in 0 degrees, and I'll tell you a bit about that later on. But I wrote this book really because along the way I had a really strong intuitive message to actually write down my experience. My background has been in the world of personal development, personal transformation for nearly 40 years. So that's how long I've been doing all this. And that was a great walk. It is a very low risk adventure in today's world. You know, you don't want to be going out into, I look at some of these trips into the back of beyond and into the Gobi Desert, and I think to myself, I don't know whether I want to go that far out. But this was a fantastic walk, and it all came about because when I was in my, when I was younger, I gave Annette a book called The Camino, A Pilgrimage of Courage, and it was written by Shirley MacLaine. Shirley MacLaine, the actress, and that piqued my interest. Then I came across another book later on by Paulo Coelho, who wrote The Pilgrimage, and then kept coming across things that kept coming across my path about this pilgrimage. And then a friend of mine died at a very young age. He was way before his time. And it was all out of the blue. 6 months he was gone, and it just struck me that don't put it off. If you're going to do it, and don't put it off to tomorrow. So I then set about to research it. One of the things I've learned through my experience in training and coaching is that it's really, really important, and life I reckon, it's really important to have a mentor. If you can find somebody who's walked the path before you, then you've got a better chance of being able to ask good questions. And so I started to ask people that I came across, and I sort of found people who had done the walk, and I bought some shoes. Now I spent $400 on this pair of shoes. Now that's probably about 10 times more than I spent on all of my shoes up to that point in time. But the thing that the message I got really strongly with this is that the two reasons why people didn't complete the Camino was, one, they would get blisters, and that came predominantly from bad shoes. It also came from poor hydration. You've got to keep your water up. And also the other thing I took with me was omega-3. I took things that were supported me to get to the end. I basically said that there's no other option for me here than to get to the end. So everything I did, it was with that mindset. And I really encourage you in your own life is when you want something, you want to do something, you want to have something, whatever it might be, then if you make it no other option, in other words, you're not prepared to get any other result than that result, that makes all the difference in whether or not you get it. And you'll find in the book that over and over again, I go across the top of that principle because it is a life principle that works perfectly. So like I said, I started to research. I read some more books. I found a place in England, in London, called the Confraternity of St. James. And the Confraternity of St. James puts out books of the Camino. And so in that you can see where the refugios, so they have two words they use, albergues and refugios. And they both mean, probably in our understanding, like low-class hostels. No, not low class, small hostels. And so, they're basically bunk beds and that sort of thing. And some of them were fascinating. But so this book lays out where they are. the distance between towns. And it was the best reference book I had because it meant that I could plan my day beforehand. One of the things I teach people when I coach and teach them in training is plan your day before you go to bed, because your mind can work on it while you're asleep. Because when we go to sleep, our intellectual side of us is asleep, but the rest of us isn't. And we communicate around the globe all the time when we're asleep. So if you pose some questions, you put a plan in place, you might wake up the next day and go, no, I'm not going to do it that way, I'm going to do it this way. So every night before I went to bed along the journey, I planned my next day. How far was I going to walk? I was always trying to leave at such a time that when I got to the next town, that was about breakfast time. And my breakfast for that whole walk was a churros and a Cafe Solo Lago, long black. I tried long black a few times and that didn't work. They didn't know what that was. Cafe Solo Lago would get me a beautiful black coffee, and because they do it through the espresso machine and not the dribble that Americans drink. So that I learnt to look at all the different aspects of the walk. And one of the things that really reflects back in life is that they said only carry in your backpack a kilo for every kilo of weight you are. Okay, so I was about 100 kilos. So I tried to make my backpack 10 kilos, but I couldn't do it. I think I ended up with 14. And the reason I ended up with 14 was because I also took protein, because the message was that sometimes it was difficult to get good protein, good quality protein on that walk. So all of that came from seeking guidance from other people who'd been and done that walk. And it's the same in life. If you've got a goal to go something, to get something done, to do something, seek not so much advice, but seek out what they've done to do it successfully. Like, you don't go to somebody who started walking and then didn't do it, do you? I mean, there's no point in asking, so why'd you fail? So that was some of the things that I was doing by asking and investigating. So when and that's the same in life, we carry too much weight. We carry all sorts of baggage in life, excess baggage, emotionally, physically, stuff in our house. If you've got stuff in your house you haven't used for 2 years, throw it away. Because all it's doing is it's actually blocking up your mind, blocking up your energy. So on the very first day, I'll show you something. Before I go to that, I'll just show you a couple of things. We'll see how we go with this. Okay. See how good that is?
Otherwise I can stand there.
Time out.
I think something changed on the move. That worked.
So when you walk the Camino, the number one thing you do is you go and get a passport. And in St. John Pied de Port, right down the bottom of it is a little creek bed, and there's a bridge that goes across that, and then you climb up into the Pyrenees. Well, about 3/4 of the way up this little hill was a place where everybody was going in there, and I think that cost €2 or something like that. So that was the front of it, and I annotated that as they're all the different places I stayed. Here's St. John Pied de Port there, and they're all the different places I stayed on the way to Santiago over there. So it was 800 k's, but little by little, everything is not that hard. But if I looked at that, sometimes before I went to this, I was groaning a little bit about 800 kilometres. I allowed 33 days to do it, and in fact, it took me 25. Because when I got on the road, I was exhilarated by, I couldn't believe it. And I got in for a little secret. I don't like walking. I really don't like walking. Ask my wife. Well, I don't like walking around in circles. But I really relished walking that distance. It was like a target. It was no other option. I'm going to get there, and which is fascinating because the day I actually left Australia, which was around about Anzac Day, I had a really full-blown knee that was clicking and it was sore and it was swollen and everything like that. But after 3 days, it was gone. Never ever came back in the whole journey. So that was the passport. You put your name on it, and that shows the other side. And then when you go and when you stay in an albergue or you stay in a refugio, they have their own stamps. So now this place here, Villa Monjardin, that was the beginning of my cold walk. And I remember very, very clearly because that night when I got there, it was raining. And I got in about 12:30, 1, because I learned that the earlier you got in, the better it was, because you got the better places to sleep. This particular place, it was just simply a rectangular room, and about that high off the floor was a piece of masonite all the way around. And because it had been raining, it was dripping in places. And so because I was there early enough, I was very fortunate because I got a spot where there was no drip, which meant I had a really good night's sleep. And from there, then I walked on to Los Arcos and Viana. So these are all the different places I stayed, all the way through to Arca, which is the last one before you get to Santiago. And when you get to Santiago, if you've walked more than 100 kilometres, you get a Compostela, which is a little certificate showing that you've actually done it. And so a lot of Spaniards, they go for the 100. They only walk 100 because they want the Compostela, but they don't want to do the whole lot. And that was about that. Albergue, Hero. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so that's the last one. So these are the places that I mapped it out. These are the places I stayed along the way. I walked 28 k's that day, 37 that day, 29 that day, etc., etc., etc. And these are all the things to remind me of the challenges that I needed to overcome, or the good things that were there. This guy here, he was a Spaniard, Marcel. He walked at a real fierce pace, but he was such an affable man, and that was one of the good things about the Caminos. Sometimes we forget that people are basically good. We see far too much news, far too much rubbish on that comes through news and papers and etc. And we forget that people are basically good, and that's what I found on this walk. So this is the day that I walked in less than 0 degrees, gale force winds, rained the whole way. And literally the rain was coming into my face. That was that cold. But the one thing that's good about the Camino, if you didn't want to serve that up, you didn't want to take that, small people. If you didn't want to put up with that, you didn't want to take that, then what you could do is you get a bus. I met a guy from Canada. He had a what he called a dodgy leg, and what he would do is that he would, when he felt good, he'd walk some, and then he'd get a bus from that town to the next town, take a day off. I met a couple, would you believe, from the Gap. I was walking down this hill, and this couple were walking sort of on a parallel. You did well. You found it. There was a couple who were walking sort of like down a dry gulch, really, and they turned out to be from the Gap, which is like less than about 10 to 15 k. The Gap, nice area. And the reason I picked it was because they were talking to each other and I could hear the Australian accents. In fact, I met about 25, 27 Australians on that walk, but the biggest number on the walk were Germans. And that was because that year, a German comedian, which I didn't know they existed, a German comedian had written a book about the Camino. And all these Germans wanted to walk it. So they're all conquering it, probably the best way to put it. So I did this as just a rough guide of some of the things that I experienced, and I'll show you some photographs shortly. This guy here was it was like an Airbnb as we know it today, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and that was a sensational stay.
I'm sorry for being late, but what year was this?
07. So that walk from Mister to that was my birthday, 9th of May, and there's a guy, an Austrian guy, and he gave me a kiwi fruit. That was my birthday present. And a lot of wonderful things there. I'll keep going because I want to shake up. So people ask, so what is the Camino? A lot of people have asked me that question since I've done it. And the Camino was it was not the Camino, it was your Camino. It was walk out of your front door of your home and walk to one of three places, either Santiago, Rome or Jerusalem. They were the three, in the Middle Ages, they were the three places to go. The reason why Santiago really got the real big profile in a lot of ways is because the mythology, if you like, behind it was that when St. James, St. Jacques is St. James, when St. James, or James the Apostle, he was beheaded by Herod. When he was beheaded, they put his body and his head, and his disciples crept in the middle of the night and put his all these bits and pieces that were left. They put them in a stone boat. That was what it was. That was the myth, and it actually ended up all the way over, and it landed up here, at Finisterre, and then people found it. They went and buried it in the hill. Now, at the time that the Camino actually gained acknowledgement, if you like, was when the Moors were still in control of Spain. They'd come over from North Africa and they were in control of Spain. But the Christians were like fighting back, and I'll show you. And St. Jacques had a really, again, mythology, he had a reputation for swooping down from the clouds and raining havoc, and that was as he was. So when there was a Christian monarch in Spain, he heard about that, so he went up there and said, "Oh, these are St. James's bones. This is sacred." And that's how it came to be that became the key place to go on a Camino. And the Camino was, the symbol of the Camino was the what do you call that shell? The scallop shell. And that's why so many of the ensigns of the whole thing look that way. And as you walk along, they would be indicating this direction. So it was really important because sometimes the indications weren't that hot, and you had to sort of scramble between the book I had from the Confraternity of St. James, you sort of find your way. But this has become probably the most popular, which is the Camino Francais. There is the Camino del Porto, there's the Camino del Norte, and there's another one that comes from Andalusia.
And which one did you do?
This one. I left here St. John de Port in there and did that one.
And how long did
It took me 25 days. I allowed 33.
Did you go by yourself?
Yeah. I went by myself
How long
because,
was it?
sorry,
Do they know how long it was?
it was 800 k's.
Right.
So an average 32 a day. I never did less than 15. I did a couple of days when I was having a rest day and I only walked 15. And the biggest walk I did was 50. And that one, I misjudged it a little bit and ended up walking too far. But anyway, I paid for the next day. The next day I was so sore. But the thing was that the if you like, to be a pilgrim, you walked out your door and you hopefully got there. There are three major crossings: the Pyrenees here, and then there's another two in here. This across here is 250 k's of flat. 250 k's of flat. That is the Meseta.
Which city you start again?
Where? St John Pierre de Port's in here. It's not on this map. It was in there. So I came over there on the first day. I came over there to Roncesvalles, and it was a matter of going. Welcome. Thank you. So it was something like a 3,000 foot climb. So it was tough going on that first day. And as I've learned in life, you know, if you've got some tough things to do, some easy things to do, if you do the tough stuff, if you do the tough stuff first, you actually create internal momentum which enables you to get more done. So there's a map from 1648, and it's just like you walk from anywhere. There's another one they call from London, and it's Camino. Just eludes me at the moment, but there's a Camino from there. There's a Camino from everywhere. In fact, the first day I walked with a guy called Søren, and Søren, that's his short version, and Søren was a Dane. He's up there, and that was the third time he'd walked it. And he was actually very, very chatty. So
Is that by coincidence that
what, that he was chatty?
no, that you walked with him?
Yeah, just coincidence.
So it's not something that's organised.
No, you can go on organised tours.
Yeah.
But I honestly, if you're going to go for an adventure, take it on, because it's not hard. It's just you just got to organise. It's like I said, it was the mentorship of people who'd been there that in the book I talk about the principles that I either had reinforced that I learned from the journey, and that day what Søren told me was take little steps. When you're walking up that steeper climb, take little steps, because if you take the normal stride you normally take and you're going up, then what you're doing is you're trying to go a mile, and you'll burn out, you'll run out of oomph. And I found that I used that a number of times. There was one particular quite a steep incline where there was a lot of screed on it. It was like really, really slippery. And again, little steps made it really easy to do, and I flew up it. So that's the map of that, and I think that's about all I got there. You want to just do the honours on photographs for me? I'll show you.
Much younger Peter Martin.
Oh, yeah, I've done that. No, it won't look through with this. No, that's right. No.
While he's fiddling with that, I noticed on an earlier slide where it had the passport up there, it actually said, the French said, Friends of the Way. And that's go as a group, we tend to stick together.
Who's that, mate?
Now that's me.
Nah, couldn't be.
It's a very skinny
How good
river.
is that? So that is outside of the refugee I stayed in St John Pierre de Port.
Before you started.
Before I started, yeah. So you can see the shoes, the $400 shoes.
So that's the only pair you had? And you're talking about all the gear you had?
Well, my backpack's not there, but you'll see my backpack shortly. So that was the beginning. Yeah, just if you just go to, actually, you might just do it as a, yeah. That's it. G'day, mate, how are you?
Hi, John.
Good to see you. You did well to get in. You didn't break into anything, Higgs.
But it's not going.
Find a place.
Now click it. We have a technical heating. Worked earlier.
Yeah, back in the side. How's that, you? G'day,
Ben.
Really good.
What are you going to come to that?
There's no, that was the cyclone.
Baby, come on, baby.
Spanish music.
Press the one in the middle, the play in the middle. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
It's not responding to the
It did before.
Who's a technical genius?
So, we'll just have to do it this way. So you just have to go back and then double. Okay, so this is, like I said, the bottom of the hill. This is the bridge. You go across this bridge and then you are literally on the Pyrenees. And it goes straight up out of there. So it's a little bit foreboding. This dude here was in his mid-70s. He had walked, he had done Strasbourg to Le Puy, and then the next year he did it at 400 kilometre lots from Strasbourg. 400 kilometres one year, 400 kilometres next year, 400, and this was his year to do 400 kilometres, which was about, I think he was going to go to Burgos. And that was about as far as he was going to go. Lovely guy. Just he was a really nice dude. So so these couple of ladies here, they couldn't find any accommodation. I'd give them a bit of a hand with that, and that's what it was like on the. You know, like I said before, it reminds you how good people are, because people help people. They help each other. You know. And the Caminos, you know, it's not without its dangers. There's been plenty of people died. There's plenty of markers on the road where people have cucked it. Because people go by bike, by mule, by you know, everything. And but in terms of risks in life, no, not risky, not risky.
Not like average.
Apart from
It'd be,
dying.
well, huh?
Apart from dying.
Yeah, but you can do that walking across the road. I mean, you don't have to pay the airfare. Okay. So that was me all strapped up, ready to go. Very bad photograph, and I'll blame the guy who took it, and I don't know who it was. Next one. So we're over there. So when we got about 300 or 400 metres up the road, that's what it was like. It was like a soup. It was a fog, but when we came through the top here like this, It was just awe-inspiring. It was just amazing. And you can see here that this is halfway up the mountain. Well, I don't think it was half. It was like a third of the way up the mountain. And you go and buy a coffee, come out, have a coffee, sit down a little bit, and it was just like a sea of all the clouds right through the mountains. And then you go right to the top. Oh, you're a genius, Tom. You go right to the top, and here, lo and behold, is the view across the Pyrenees. So it was getting towards the top of the Pyrenees. Has anybody seen The Way? There's a movie out there called The Way, and it was written by Emilio Estevez, Martin Sheen's son, and Martin Sheen stars in it. And it's a story of a guy who went up into the in late winter, went up into these areas in late winter, got lost and died. And it's the story of his father going there to get his body back. He was a doctor, to get his body back, but then he had the lifetime, the journey of a lifetime. And it's a good movie. And Emilio has a couple of things, but you know the irony of that, when I saw that, is the year that I walked, a guy had gone up there in January and died from exposure. Now, you don't walk into the Alps, because this was April, next winter. This was April, and the snow was still on that's the top track across the Pyrenees, and the snow was still all on the ground. So it was cold, and so, you know, you imagine you go up there in January, when the fog's worse, when the weather closes in, when there's more snow, you'd have to have a screw loose.
So people walk it all the time?
Yeah, they do, but they don't encourage you to walk it across the winter months. So that's Surin on the left and Rainer on the right. And when we got over, when we got over the top of the mountain, it was then it was about 900, no, it might have been about 1,500 feet down to Roncesvalles. So it was pretty steep. It was pretty, you know, I can remember slipping all the way down some of the screeds. And we got to this, it was an old, what do you call them, monastery. And they had this gigantic room. It would have been at least the length of this building, and it was just full of double bunks. And that's where people stayed the night. It was interesting. You know, I said before about people took too much stuff. You know, we were told 1 kilo for every 10 kilos you are, no more. And so you know what that does? That makes a real huge hole in your wardrobe. You know, I took 2 pairs of quick dry shirt and pants. The pants could be zippered off because, you know, if it got hot, there's nothing worse. I took a sleeping bag. I took a protein bar for every day. I took omega-3. I took my hat. And I think I took 1 extra shirt. So that was, I couldn't get away with it anything less than 14 kilos. You know, it's like, how do you do 10? Anyway, the irony is that day we went up the mountain. As you're walking up, you can see stuff here, stuff here, stuff here, stuff here. And there's one girl, she was from Hungary, and she had a backpack that went from, like, she's only short, so she had a backpack that went from her backside and it went up here, about that high above her head. Anyway, in Roncesvalles, in that monastery, downstairs where you go and have a shower, there are shelves, and it says on there, feel free to leave behind what you don't need, and feel free to take whatever you do need. And there was always, the guy from there was saying, there's always more stuff left behind than taken, because after they had that experience, they realised that you don't need that much. It's like life. How much stuff do we need? We don't need much. And so,
You find out in your own time.
so that last shot was in a forest on the second day, as we were walking towards Zubri. Yeah, that one. So these guys, they were my companions on that day. So my companions constantly changed. And you know, to me that reminds me of life, that friends change in life. You know, people come into your life for various reasons, but they only stick around if you've got commonalities. If you only kept travelling a similar road. And it's nothing, it's not a loss for you to lose a friend. It's trying to keep a friend purely for the so that I've got a friend is done.
But Pete, you said the language barrier wasn't that big.
No, not really. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, all right. So at the end of that walk from that forest in Zubri, from there you go to Pamplona. And just outside of Pamplona is the place I stayed in. Anyway, that night I went into the bar because that's the bars in Spain. You know, they're the place to eat really. Then it's not like our bars. And there was a guy sitting here. Actually, he was there and I was here. And I tried a few times to start up a conversation with him, and he's no speak of English at all in any way, shape or form. But it was interesting. We were watching football, and I said, "Football," and he goes, "Oh, come on!" And there was a local team there, and you know, and again, commonality, and empathy. You know, that's what builds communication in people. Words is part of it, but the heart's all of it, everything. Okay, so that is on a walk out of Pamplona. Pamplona is right down there in the background. The walk all the way up was full of mudslides, so it's really, really tricky. Got to the top of this one, and then next one.
How's the reception of mobile phone?
Most of the time it was fairly good. I got a phone call. I just left a place. I just had my morning breakfast, the churros and Cafe Solo Largo. That was my breakfast every day. I got a phone call from Annette, I think it was. No, it might have been Tim, to say that her car had been totaled.
Oh.
You know, and that was the Peugeot.
Let him know that he was missing.
Anyway, and the good part was she was fine, but stupid truck in the wrong place, wrong time. So this is on the top of that rise after coming out of Pamplona, and these are all cut out of copper. And it's again, there's so many things like this, and along the way, various things you know, I was doing it. I wasn't hanging around to, you know, sort of stuff around with it too much. I didn't stop and go, oh, isn't that beautiful? I kept walking. But what was fascinating on that hill was all of those windmills. You know, they and we won't even get into that.
No.
So next. So this town here, I've tried to work out what it is, but I'm not exactly sure where it is. But it's like it was coming down off that hill and along, and I probably could work it out. But the interesting thing about that is it's typical of so many of the towns of Europe that they have the central village, the fortified village, and then they have stuff around the outside, and then churches on top. And that was so similar. So if you go next, it's the same everywhere. This is coming out the other side. This road here was from around about 250 BC, and it was built by the Romans. It was so fascinating is to be going through the history all the way. You're experiencing history, and the great thing about it was we were walking. Whoever, I don't think I walked with anybody there. Next one. This one is in a town. I think it's Santo Domingo, something or other. And anyway, this was a fascinating town because when I got into this one, I went to the I think the Refugio was in a building similar to that, but it was further down. And when you come into town, the first thing you do is you go and find your spot. You go and find your accommodation. Best time to be in if you're going to do it is to be in before 1. because what happens at 1 is a lot of towns, between 1 and 3, they have siesta and places to eat shut, and you can't go and buy a ham and cheese croissant, or you can't buy much. So it was to get in by 1, get your posse, and then go and explore the city and the town you're in, which would work perfectly. In this one, I didn't get a spot. But what I did got, the guy said to me, he said, "Hey, we've got a few places that will take boarders." He said, "Here, go there." So I eventually find it. I'm walking up the stairs inside this building, and a lady comes out, and she starts going off at me in Spanish. Now, as it turned out, she didn't speak a word of Spanish. Didn't speak a word of English. Nothing whatsoever, except that she made it very clear. So they wanted 2 people, not 1. So I had to go and find something. So I went down, and when you came into that town, it was through a big wind tunnel, and then I just sat there and waited and saw people come, and people went into places out. Anyway, this big tall dude came in, and I'm going, "That's the guy." So I went up to him. I said, "Mate, you looking for the accommodation?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, tough Bicky, it's all full." And it turned out to be an Austrian. Now, what was fascinating about that is that my son spent 7 years in Austria till probably around at that time. It wasn't that different to that time. So we were talking about a whole lot of things, but then it turned out, would you believe it, he'd done this personal development, that personal development. He'd been to Robbins, he'd read this book, he'd read that book. And so we got in up top and then came back and we had dinner, and it was just fabulous. It was fabulous to find somebody from a totally different culture who had been on a similar path to me in discovering, who I am and what life's really all about. And so the next day, we had a conversation. We got up. We had a conversation with this lady. And we were trying to work out what she was trying to say. And what she was trying to say was, you two, because we're both tall and slim, so you two are, just like my son. And we go, "Oh, yeah, so where's he?" And she said, "Oh, he's dead." So he passed away, and he passed away at a really young age. And but it was really, we were left with a really lovely feeling of giving her something, back in terms of being there. It was gorgeous. She was really good, but she was struggling because she couldn't understand and we couldn't understand it. So next. So this was Pepe. That's Pepe on the right, and he was in Espinosa del something. You come back to me. This guy here was Giovanni. He was from Italy. 2 of those people, I think that guy back down there, I think he was from England. She was from Italy. And these people here from Germany, and they were from, I think, might have been Sweden. But we had about 5 different nationalities around the table. In fact, I think it was a New Zealander. Anyway, so we had 5 different nationalities around the table, and we just had the best night.
So your plate's finished?
Eh?
Did you take that photo?
Yeah.
So your plate's finished already?
Yeah, no, it was nice. It was beautiful food. And that's what you pay. You pay €6, he feeds you and gives you a bed. And everywhere you go, there are Pellegrino meals. And so they're cut price, they're probably cut size too, but they sustained us along the way, and you'd always find somebody to have a chat with. And that was a lovely night. That is a real memory for me because it typifies the walk. By letting go of being afraid of things, you can actually walk into some really wonderful relationships in life. And the Caminos, The commando is purely a metaphor for how to live life. Because if you get too security conscious, you do not touch the beautiful things in life.
Right, so,
So next one, Doug.
How much they charge for the accommodation normally?
Most of the accommodation in the refugios and the albergues. Oh well, let me put it this way. The rule of thumb I got from my investigation before I went was you need to have about €1 per kilometre for the whole thing, for everything. For food, €1 per kilometre for the whole walk. So accommodation, food, anything you possibly could need, whatever. So it was about €800.
that's pretty cheap.
Well, if you go on a guided tour, they're about $1,500 for 7 days, and you will not get anything like it. This, anyway. So this was that screeded one that I spoke about before, that I'd taken small steps to get to the top, and these things cropped up from time to time. So next one. Then now on the bottom of that hill, this is a place just outside of Burgos, and we met this really lovely couple. They had a bar, but they also baked their own bread and stuff. And this guy here was Italian, and so we mucked around with the three of us. So we just mucked around because you get in there about 12, 1, you've got all afternoon to muck around, and next one. And that was me behind the bar, the guy, and we just had again lovely things you'd never forget. I mean, this is how long? 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and I always remember this stuff. Yep. And then then you get sort of moments when you don't remember anything. No, go back. That is the front of the cathedral in Lyon. And the cathedral in Lyon has better stained glass windows than Notre Dame, especially now. But it did. So go forward again. Remember before I said about Saint Jean and he's riding down on a white horse from the heavens? That typifies what he was the one who was cleansing Spain of the Moors. And so, because the Camino came into being around about 900 AD. That's when it started. It's been going now for whatever that is, 1,200 years. And while the numbers have gone up and down, it has always remained a pilgrimage. And this stuff is just unbelievable to look at. And very powerful when you're right in front of it. Okay? And that's it from the outside. It's huge. It is just massive. And they're the two guys. That's the Italian guy. I'm not sure who that guy was, but I think he was another Italian. I seem to find a lot of Italians along the way. I was in Rioja. How do you spell that wine? How do you pronounce that wine? Rioja. Yeah. So I was in that place, which was near Ventosa, and we got up in the morning, and we were getting ready to go, and there was a guy there, and he says, Giacomo, and I go, Peter. Giacomo, and I tried 3 times with Peter, that didn't work. So I said, Pietro, oh, Pietro. And again, just mirroring his intonations and his friendly. He was just a friendly guy. In fact, later on, him and 2 other guys, that other Spanish guy I said before, we crisscrossed paths a lot of times. And I had dinner with that guy, this Giacomo. I had dinner with him in a Templar castle in Ponferrada. And we sat there for the whole night, and neither of us speaking the other's language. And we discovered about their kids and all of that through sign language, a little dribble here, a little dribble there. It was so wonderful, wasn't it? And I can still remember I had lamb shanks. Okay. That photograph is really to show you the degree that the storks take over that area of the world. See them up the top of the building? There, everywhere. Yenda. That's on the front of the book. I came out of this town, and I looked at that and I'm thinking, now that's the Camino. That to me typifies the endlessness of it. And it was just, and it's like, so one part of you goes, oh crap, that's a long way. And the other part of you goes, oh, fantastic, you know, it's like it's some more excitement. Okay, next one. Okay, so this is towards the end of the Masada, and so that's 250 kilometres of flat. Funniest thing you've seen. There's a guy, no, a girl. There's a girl in the front. They were on a tandem bike. The guy in the back. They were riding into, I reckon, about 20 km/h headwind, and the guy at the back's doing zip. The girl's doing all the work in the front. Anyway, so you can't freeload. People don't like you for it. So that is a reflection of the fact that Astorga, the city of Astorga, was a central pivotal point in the Roman Empire. The Masada was the wheat bowl of for a long, long time. It was a major place they came to get their cereals and their grains, and also that's where all the gold was mined in this area. Next one. So the reason that's in there is because that's a beautiful story. I was walking into Framista, and the two guys on the outside, this guy and this guy, they were just wandering along, and it's the only time on the whole trip that I met Americans. This guy here was a sitting judge in Arizona. This guy was a psychiatrist who'd retired, got divorced, and restarted again because he needed to. The guy in the middle was actually the Hansard reporter from the Irish Parliament.
Sorry, what?
Sorry?
Sorry, what was that? The guy?
He's like the Hansard reporter inside the Parliament, where they take all the notes.
Oh, yeah.
So he was from the Irish Parliament. I met a guy who had formerly been the CEO of one of the largest companies in Europe, and he was now a Kabbalah instructor. And he was the carry. He was about that much taller than me. He was huge.
So it seems to be mainly men.
No, plenty of women.
Oh, okay. No, just let's be frank.
All right, I'll
Our
take some.
stories
He
are
didn't
men.
take too many photos of him with women, you know, so that I wouldn't get
Yeah,
jealous.
that's right.
So this guy here,
Yes.
this is where they were finishing basically. He was going from there to Den Haag, and where he was submitting his application to go on the War Crimes Tribunal. So that's just the level of standing. And this guy here, I think he was heading home. So, and we shared a bottle of wine and some love, you know, food, but it's just a company. It was so brilliant. And then, okay, next. And the Holberts were still there. Now they were bodegas, they were just places where they stored the wine. Next. And that was me.
Which one?
The skinny one.
That's not big. Too cool.
That hat was really good. And next one. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what the accommodation was like in some of the refugios. Now, some of them, there were rooms to themselves, right? But predominantly it was a bit like that. Men, women. I remember one girl saying something about, oh, I can stand the snoring. I said, I don't have a problem with that. I don't snore. No, I don't hear it anyway. That's right. That's how I get away with that one. Next one. This guy was he was from Holland, and he was in this really remote place, and this is what he was doing with his life. He was like an outreach, if you like, you know. He was dedicating his life to supporting people and talking to people, you know, we can all play different roles in different places in life. Okay, next one. And that just took my breath away as far as being a tapestry. And that was just so much like so many things that when you went in the churches. And you know, if you've been to Europe, I mean, after a while you get little over churches and all those sort of things. But there were some of these on this road were brilliant. And sit down, no photographs. Keep going. And not sure where that is. Okay, next one. There's the stalks again. They were everywhere. They were just absolutely everywhere. This guy here, he'd actually started from the play, and he had been going already for 6 months. And so Søren had walked from Copenhagen, the guy the first day. So he'd walk whatever that is. So people walk enormous distances. And that was, the way was like that so often. It's just beautiful. This is a place called Hospital Orbiga. And Hospital del Orbiga was a place where, as the folklore has it, that the guy who he'd lost his love to some other jerk, and they challenged them to a joust. And so this is the jousting ring, and I think it was in the 1500s, something like that, 1400, 1500. And it's still there today, and every year they celebrate that event by having jousts. Not me. It's not a shot of it. So that's in Astorga, and those ruins are, again, they're about 50 or 60 BC. They're all Roman ruins, and when you walk up, I think you walk up the hill this way, and you look over there, and that's all that was created by Romans. Incredible history, and not so much history, but new jazzed up attractions. There's a few of them. This one here is a place called Ravenel, and the reason I took that photograph, that lady there is from America. She works in that refugio, and in the year before, this thing at the back here, that was all the different nationalities that came through that refugio in the previous year, the previous walking season, and there were 51 countries. So, and she's a woman. Next one. This is Cruz de Ferro. Cruz de Ferro is a legendary place because in Celtic time, when the Celts would go over the mountains, they would put stones here to appease the gods so they wouldn't get, like blasted by the lightning. And when the Christians took over, what the Christians did is they put a cross on the top of it, and they essentially, the whole idea of it is that when you go there, you take a stone from where you came from, and you put all of the things you want to leave behind in your life, and put that energy into the stone. When you come here, you leave the stone behind, and that's why the mountain stones have continued to grow. And it's right on top of one of those mountains that I was talking about before. Just go one more. So when you come down the other side, right across here and all the way around were snow-capped mountains. And if you've heard the song From a Distance, that's exactly the feeling. I can right now, I'm getting the shiver down my spine that I got when I was standing on top of that mountain. And from a distance, we all look the same. From a distance, there are no foes. It's just, well, it is. So that was just, and then a bit further down that track, that's on the back of my book. That's a little town, they've all got the same colour roof, which I have no idea how they did it, but they do. It's £9. That's the Templar Castle in Ponferrada. This one. That also is the Templar Castle in Ponferrada. It's been fully restored. That was somebody doing it by horse, couple of horses. This was the crossing between Galicia and they have counties in Spain. It's Galicia, and you can see the two different coat of arms. So keep going. So that's a typical Celtic house on that journey. We stayed there. We had dinner in there and then slept there as well. We were going to sleep outside, but we didn't. In fact, the whole time I was on that journey, I never once opened my sleeping bag. I took it though. It was a little tiny thing, but actually I did. In that, you know, that place I spoke about before that said that was dripping from the roof. I opened it then because I put it down and then I lay on top of it. Don't want to get too wet. So 100 k's is the telling point for the Camino. If you can prove that you've walked 100 k's, in other words, by the stamps in the passport, you can go in to the office and get a Compostela. It says that you've walked the Camino, even though you don't know 100 k's. So a lot of Spaniards just do 100 k's, and they do 100 k's every 2, 3, 4 years. You know, they do it regularly. And that was me proving that I had got there. Next one. Some of the tracks were a little dicey. You don't know that was one for cars. Next one. But, you know, and you can see by this, the number of people. There were so many people walking. But I used to get up at about 6 every morning, which was still a bit dark, and then head off. Next one. Let's just go back that one. If you can. So this one here is not far from Santiago, and those three guys I was talking about before, I ended up calling them the Three Amigos, because that, you know, I woke up one morning and they had already head off, and so they were probably about 15, 20 metres in front of me.
Well, the two Yanks and
No, these three guys were Yakimo, Marcel, and another guy who was a Brazilian. So he spoke Portuguese and a little bit of both the others. The guy who spoke Spanish didn't speak Italian, and the guy who spoke Italian didn't speak either of the others. So they would go down, and you never heard so much laughter in all your life. I don't know how they communicated with each other, but it was. So I ended up calling them the Three Amigos. Like if you look back on that thing with all those notes that I wrote, the Three Amigos. That was the morning they headed off. Yep. And then that's the cathedral, and it's massive. Go again. That was my reward for finishing.
You said you had that every morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I rewarded myself. I had 3 churros. I only had one. Well, maybe 2. Actually, no, that's not true. A lot of the time, I just had a croissant and a coffee.
That's a whole lot different.
And so this is in the place that I hung out with, because I got there. My flight didn't leave until 8 days after I got there, because I got there so early. So I hung out here for 8 days and just met some fascinating people, because they're all coming through, only staying a little bit and going on. I remember there was a couple from Toronto who were Colombian, and I said something about crazy Spaniards. He said, "Oh yeah, they're daft." It's really interesting, because Spanish in South America and Spanish, like in Catalan, like very different. They're the you know how to spell it? Tell a Catalan commentator in football, Barcelona. They got lift. So there's Giovanni again, and that's the airport. We were on our way out of the country. He was going home to Italy, and I was going to London. And that was the journey.
How much weight you lost from the walk?
Not a lot, not really.
Yeah, the secure.
They're all giving me a hard time. So I definitely lost weight. I reckon probably about 10 kilos.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so
10%.
yeah, well, it was good because, and the part of that was because it just didn't need that much. Didn't need it. Sustained by the journey, sustained by the achievement, sustained by, when you're sustained by stuff that is fueling your spirit. Because when I went, it wasn't just the physical aspect, it was the mental, the emotional, the spiritual aspects of it all. Because, you know, there's times when you need the courage to get up and keep going when you don't feel like it. And that's life. And that's why I wrote the book, to pass those, to marry this journey to what happens in life. And to encourage everybody that you can do anything you want. There is no impossibility unless it's in our mind. And that's why I've been training in the area of mindset for nearly 40 years. Because if you can take control of your mind, nobody can control it. Otherwise, if you don't take control of your mind, everybody will try and control it. Just look at politics, look at papers, look at all that stuff. So that's why I wrote the book. There's a reminder of those things. When you guys came in here before, I was sitting there as I was going through some of the lessons that I'd learned, and I was thinking, gee, you were wise then. But I must say that it was very much inspired by the journey, and not by me per se. If you would like to buy the book, it's $20. If you can think of somebody that you'd like to give a present to for Christmas, birthday, tomorrow, the next day, any day, you can have the next two. You can have the next two for $30. Right, so you can get another two for $30, just on tonight, just because it's a launch. And any questions?
How long did you do it? How long did it take you?
25 days.
And how many miles was that?
800 kilometres. So average 32 a day.
Oh, 32.
Biggest one was 50,
Okay.
and the smallest one was about 15.
So you wouldn't know how far you're going each day, was that just determined?
No, when I was doing all the research behind it and working out the journey and what it was going to take, I got a book from London, from the Confraternity of St James, and it basically would tell you where there were refugios, how many spaces were available, because some refugios, or albergues as they're called, some of them only had 10 spots. So you're trying to double down your bets that you weren't going to miss out. And I never missed out.
So do people pre-book it though?
No, not in those places.
No.
Some people go from like bed and breakfast to bed and breakfast, but that's going to cost you a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
And you miss the nitty gritty of hanging out with people who are of a similar ilk. You know, people doing this. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, there's some great lessons in there. I remember there was a couple there. You know, they were having a great learning experience because neither of them really understood the other one's pace. See, in life we all have different paces. The challenge is to find a partner or somebody you're traveling the road with who can appreciate when you're running, they don't have to run. They can walk behind, because the walking behind is bigger support when you're running. And it's the same as the Camino. If Ned and I walked now, she'd probably get into the town 2 hours before me, and I'd be just wandering along after her, and we'd work it out. Because it's not a race. Life is not a race. Life is not a race. It's a journey. And at the end of the day, the quality of the journey determines the legacy you leave behind. And that's why the Camino is such a great metaphor. Our plans right now are to hopefully in March next year thereabouts, March, April, we're going to head and do the Camino in France from La Paix to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And it's a very different topography. It's a lot more like that than that's the good thing about the Francais, is it is, yes, it's like that on the first day, but you can cheat. There is you can go around. You don't have to go over the top, but it's spectacular up there. Absolutely spectacular.
And the signage is good.
Yeah, very good.
So very clear.
So that, the blue sign you saw before?
Overall, the signage.
Yeah. So overall, the probably the number one sign that says this is the Camino Francais is a little yellow arrow on a blue background. That one that I showed you before with the on that map, that big one, that is also quite prevalent. Or the shell, the blue shell, but it's the blue and the yellow. I only have one time when I got a bit mixed up.
Well, did you have a map as such, like clean?
No, well, only the one out of the passport.
Yeah, that was it.
So what was your fitness level like? Did you have to train?
When I started, I trained so much. One day I walked 12 kilometres here. The next day I just walked 12 kilometres, and that was all I did. Nothing else.
So why did you do it?
I had a really strong. At the time of my life, I was looking for more meaning in my life, and so I was looking for some direction, and it was a bit like you know how they say that teachers or professors or whatever, they go on a sabbatical. It was like my sabbatical, and it was to strengthen my spirit. I had an amazing experience when I got better after being very sick. I got really better, and I had a very strong leaning to that. My purpose of my life was to influence a lot of people. And I said to somebody the other night, and just don't take this the wrong way, like David, please don't take this the wrong way. I feel like Colonel Sanders. I've just turned 65, and I'm just getting started. Because we had 6 kids. When you have 6 kids, and you have a fruit shop, and a network business, and everything else going on in their life, it's chaos. I wouldn't trade those days for anything. They were the best teachings that I could ever possibly give my kids. And for us also. But there came a point in time where it was like we started again. And I don't have any qualms about that either. Because it's been a wonderful journey. We've done some incredible things, amazing things. We've traveled like all over the world. So I don't have any regrets. And I'm coming back to that same thing, which is one of the reasons why that sat on the bookshelf for a long time before I got it published. Because now I want to take it to the world, that you can have a great life if you choose. And everything that you have within you enables you to choose anything. You can choose wellness. You can choose anything. Nothing can stop you if you understand the dynamics of your mind. And that's what I teach. And so this book is just the beginning of that.
I love it. I'm only halfway through, and it's more than just a journey.
Yeah.
A lot of metaphors and a lot of inspiration.
Well, everywhere they were just constantly around.
Yeah, it's good.
Your wife found you a better person after the walk?
Absolutely.
It's hard to imagine.
Oh, do you think I should let her answer?
Possibly,
Yeah, I think, as Peter said, it's that knowing when you yourself are a little out of kilter, and you took time out to spend alone and to do the walk, and use that time to rebalance and then move forward.
Did you have any doubts about him doing that?
No, originally we were doing it together, but the more planning that went on, the scareder I got, because I knew that for Peter it was a mission, and I wasn't prepared to tackle it that way, and I wanted it much more open-ended. So we made the decision that he would go and do it on his own, and later down the track we'd do it together. Finally, we're getting to that point.
And that's because our life keeps unfolding in front of us. And the thing that's been so wonderful about Annette,
I'm gonna get my car in the.
8:30.
Is that the?
Yeah, the car park starts at 8:30. So if you want a car, you don't want to walk home. All right, we'll finish.
It said 8 o'clock on the.
No, this shuts at 8.
Oh, is that what it is?
Like the chick told me 8:30.
So we're parking just at the bottom there, it's till
Well, all right then, run.
No,
I don't want, no, he's gonna leave there, so.
I don't think
I'll check with the.
you got the card.
Yep.
Thought you could get that.
You got Air Force card on
I have.
the machine? Have?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
So, yeah. And please give me praise. I made the print extra large.
Yes. Yes,
You
you
actually
have.
got it.
I had a book club for 18 years, and the number one reason people didn't read the book, it's very small.
Nice big letters.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, it was very interesting.
Hopefully that was worth your time.
It's gonna be